Well, howdy, friends. Welcome to the first episode of Local Matters, the show where we talk about absolutely everything not about the federal government. We are here to discuss the election, my friends. I don't know if you know this. We are in an election right now. We got a couple of weeks until Election Day. Hopefully everyone is registered to vote. Everyone's ready to go and cast their ballot. And we're going to talk about the candidates today. But here's the thing. We are not going to talk about any candidates with the last name Trump or Biden or Jorgensen or Hawkins or any of those people, right? Because the top of the ticket is in large part decided at this point. I don't think anything that we can say on this podcast is going to change anyone's mind about that. And honestly, I really don't care. I don't. And part of this is about why you shouldn't either. You really shouldn't care, at least not as much as you do. And we'll talk about that in a second, about who is at the top of the ticket and who's voted for at the top of the ticket. That really shouldn't matter as much as it does. But we're here to talk about who is on the rest of your ticket. Now, that's what's...
Wait, there's more? There's more?
There is more. Yeah, there's a whole bottom part of the ticket that a lot of people largely ignore.
I've never flipped over the page.
It's so true, right? You get a whole sheet for your ballot, and there's all these people most people have never heard of. We need to talk about those guys because those guys are your local leaders. They're your state leaders, and that's what really matters, right? Your local matters, and it matters in many cases more than what's happening at the federal level. Now, again, we're going to break down why that is, and again, that's kind of going to be a theme of this podcast, hence the name, right? But that's what we're here to discuss. We're here to kind of break down what's going on for you in the area that you live, what really matters, who has a tangible hold on how you live your life, and how you're going to vote for those individuals. And that's what's important here. Now, with me, I've brought, I don't know if you've heard him, but I've brought a fairly interesting individual. It's a good friend of mine, James. He's going to be with me today. And like I said, I've said this before. I'm calling you a guest. I don't even know if that's an appropriate term. You might end up being a regular on this podcast.
It all depends on how I actually act myself today.
Yeah, you're going to be my phone call when I'm like, hey, everyone else said no. let's get James. Let's get James up on here, man. Oh, James. Okay, yeah, you're my fallback plan, buddy. But no, he's a really interesting individual. He's like me. He likes to talk quite a bit. Which is why I like him on here, because if I don't have anything to say, you can bet that he'll chime in with something. He'll figure out something to say. And, he's really into sort of the political sphere, the legal sphere. He's got a little bit of expertise on that. It's really a lot easier if James just tells you who he is instead of me, because I'm going to get something wrong. I know I'm going to get quite a few things wrong. So James, tell everyone who you are and why on earth I invited you on this podcast.
Well, I think you invited me on here is because I have nothing else to do, which is fantastic, because I'm right now awaiting the results of my bar test. I took it in September for the Texas bar, and as usual fashion, I get to wait 2 months to see if I even pass the dang thing. So that's me on that end. I'm someone who's lived in Texas all my life, married to a beautiful woman, having a kid in February, so my life's about to get really interesting. But Nick's correct. I do pay attention to politics way too much, and I have a lot to say about things that typically change the next day. So that's mostly my life.
So let's talk about it. So I'm interested in this whole bar concept, right? Because you've taken the bar.
Correct.
You've taken the Texas bar, and you are awaiting your status on whether or not you get to practice law in the state of Texas. Okay?
Correct.
And you have to wait 2 months?
2 months.
You have to wait 2 months to
I get
determine.
to sit on pins and needles for 2 months.
I think I had to wait 3 days for a test result when I was doing my undergrad, and I couldn't breathe. I was so nervous. How is that for you? That's got to be intense.
It is in certain ways, and then it isn't, because as you know with tests, you've already submitted it. You can't change it. You can talk about it till your breath gives out, but you can't change a dang thing. But the weird thing is they prep you for that. At least I think they do, which is totally my conspiracy theory on this. For law school, because you typically wait around, for at least for us, was around 2 to 3 weeks for your grades for your finals and your midterms.
That's ridiculous, man.
Yes, it really is. And
Storm into my professor's office, be like, I demand to know.
and they would say, here's the door, see you later.
Exactly.
We don't care. Because they don't have to care, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But it's just something, like, it's just part of the game. I volunteered for this. I knew it was going to be this crappy, and that's just the game. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be even harder for those who took the bar this October, because if you didn't know, Texas had 2 bars this year because of Rona, and they don't find out their results until December. And if they fail, they get to retake at the same time everybody gets to retake it, which is in February. So they have a lot less time to actually re-gear up to see if they passed.
So when exactly do you? So your test group, when do you guys figure out whether you passed or not?
Supposedly around early November.
Okay, yeah. I always imagine. So I've had this you and I have had this conversation before. I travel, or I used to travel again. This is in BC. This is before COVID, right? I used to travel on airplanes all the time, and I would always kind of internally chuckle at the people that when we hit turbulence, they would freak out and look out the window and go, because at this point I'm like, you're in the sky.
Nothing you can do.
There's nothing even if there was, like, even if we were being attacked, right? What are you gonna do about
Just
it?
ask
right?
for another cocktail and let it go down.
Yeah. So what was that? I think it was Ron White that said,
Yeah.
hit something hard. I don't want to walk away from this wreck. That's the thing, is that, so that's kind of where you are, right? You're in this, like, listen, it's there, whatever it is. So if you don't pass, if you by some miracle fail your bar, or I don't even know if it's called a fail. Maybe it's just not pass, right? Bars pass fail, right?
Yeah, it's just pass
okay,
fail.
cool.
So yeah, it would be.
So if you don't pass the bar, what options for you are there after that? Do you get to take it again?
Yeah, I had to take it again because I didn't go through 3 years of crap to not try to get my actual law degree or my actual bar card. But I'd have to take it in February, and in February it's a whole new test, because this is the last time Texas will have a Texas bar. In February, they are going to what they call the universal bar exam, which is a way for most states to allow someone to pass one test and be bar appropriated or bar passing for multiple states. I think it's around 30 some odd states. So you can pass one test and be bar ready for about 30 states. The only issue with that is, well, it sounds good because it is. I mean, it's a nice concept, but all my education for the bar has been Texas rules. Once it goes universal, it's the universal rule, not with the Texas minority rules. And if you don't know, Texas has minority positions on quite a few things. Yeah. One of them being oil and gas, and that doesn't exist anymore once you go to the universal. So that's my only issue is, well, it's like, okay, I'd have to retake it. That's no big deal. That happens. If you fail the bar, it's not the end of the world, because a lot of people do. It's not saying you're stupid. It's a very tough test to pass, but I get to learn a whole new test. Allegedly. There you go.
So they're going universal, where you can practice. So if you pass this universal bar, your law license now qualifies for those 30 states?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you have to pay like another fee. That'd be the only thing, but yeah, you're essentially ready to go.
So that's one of those things, and you kind of mentioned it. That's one of those things that sounds good when you first hear it, and then you think about it a little more, and you're like, wait.
Because you have to relearn all the Texas laws. Like, okay, good, I have a bar card. It was like, okay, but now I have to learn the actual Texas laws.
Now you have to learn the laws of those specific states. So that's the issue, is that the laws are different in each state, which is a product of federalism, which is the point of this podcast, right? That's really the thing, because that, to me, when you think about it, it kind of sounds silly, because the law in Texas is not the same as the law in Missouri or California, or New York or Maine or anywhere like that, which is one of the glories of the United States. In my opinion, it's one of the best things about the United States is our federal system. Now, we hear that word federal thrown around a lot. What does federal actually mean? What's the actual definition? Because a lot of times we hear federal and we just think, oh, that means government. Not necessarily, right? So federalism is about how your local and your municipal governments relate to the national government, right? The big government where you have the Bidens and Trumps and all of that, right? So most systems around the world are unitary governments, meaning that the national government is what produces and maintains the local governments, right? So the local governments exist at the discretion of the national government. The provincial governments exist at the precedent of the national government, but they are beholden to the laws of the national government, right? And they have to
So it's
kind of
decided top down.
yeah,
so
and
you're
they
saying.
kind of have to operate based on the regulations that the national government passes down. Then the opposite of that, the other side of that, is confederalism. Right now, confederalism, you've heard the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America. Also, you might be aware of the Articles of Confederation, which preceded the Constitution. Confederalism is the opposite, right? So the national government exists and operates at the discretion of the provincial governments, or in our case, the states, right? So the original means of our republic, right, of the United States before the Constitution came in was under the Articles of Confederation, where basically the states were the final authority and the national government operated at their discretion. And then we changed it to sort of a compromise, which is called federalism. Not a lot of federal countries in the world. I think Germany is a federal system, but the United States obviously is the most popular federal system, in which the national government and the states cooperate, but they exist at their own discretion.
Right.
Right. So not one creating the other, not one managing the other. They're separate. They have different roles, right? There's a role for the federal government and there's a role for the state governments.
Well, it's like a Supreme Court justice said, the state's allowed to have their own laboratory of system. They're allowed to try it out in their state, and unless it actually goes against a constitutional amendment, they're allowed to do whatever they want to in that state, or that's at least what it should have been.
Yeah, well, which I think is great. I think that's ideal, right? Because we live in a giant country. We have a massive diversity of views in this country. And I think federalism is the best way to go for that, because the reality is that if you don't like the laws in your area, you can stay in the country, right? You're still in the United States, but you can move to another place that doesn't have those kind of laws, right? If you don't like California, move to Texas. If you don't like Texas, move to New York. If you don't like New
I think
York,
a prominent person did that recently.
yeah, several prominent people did that recently. If you don't like New York, move to Florida, which lots of people are doing right now, right? So you're seeing, and again, this is kind of idea of what's the term? Voting with your feet.
Yeah.
Right. It's this idea of, if you don't like the laws where you are, you can stay, you can work to change them, but ultimately, the joys of federalism, the glories of federalism, right? These are kind of hyperbolic words, I suppose, but the good thing about federalism is the fact that what's relevant are the people in your area, right? The people that are most relevant to you are the people literally in the closest proximity to you, right? In the closest physical proximity, right? So the way it's supposed to work is that and again, supposed to, and we'll talk about why this has changed, right? But the way that it's supposed to work is that who's in the White House shouldn't really matter that much, right? Yeah. They really don't have a huge amount of effect on your life.
Well,
they shouldn't, right? They shouldn't have a huge amount of effect on your life. The laws that they pass should be in a more general sphere, and they should really apply not to individuals, but to the states, right? The federal government passes laws, and then the states utilize those laws in order to regulate the individuals within the municipalities in which they live.
Correct.
Right? So that's how it's supposed to work. And so again, the president, right? I think it was, oh gosh, what's that guy's name? Bill Burr, right? Bill Burr had a whole thing where he said, "When was the last time the president did anything to help you? Like, when was the last time the president made you a sandwich?" Right? And he's not supposed to, right? The president is supposed to be this figurehead that oversees the federal government and their regulations towards the states. But the person that's more important is probably your governor, right? Or the people
for us, yeah,
or the people in your state representative, and then even next to that, the person that should be even more influential directly on your life is your mayor, right, or your city council, and those laws, right, should have a more direct effect on your life. And all the way, if you want to really boil it all the way down to the government official that has the most immediate effect on your life is the police officer outside your car. Or the judge in whose courtroom you're standing, right? These are government officials that have the most direct effect on you as an individual, because again, it literally almost breaks down to physical proximity, right?
Yep.
How close they are to you in a geographical sense. And that's the way it should be.
Nick, to that point, I think this whole pandemic has actually kind of helped highlight that on who you should really care about, because I think a lot of people have now realized, one, probably who their governor is, maybe who their mayors are.
Who their governor is, yeah.
And the decisions they've made, and good or bad. I mean, I'm not here to to tell Dallas what to do. I'm not here to tell Austin what to do or anything like that in Texas. But the governor has essentially said, here's my baseline rule. Based on that baseline rule, you make your decisions locally. And I think that it's actually helped people realize, oh, there are other people besides, as you talked about at the beginning of the show, Trump and Biden.
Trump and Biden, yeah, exactly. Trump and Biden and Jorgensen and Hawkins. What's the guy's name? Howie. Who's the Green Party? Hayden, will you look up who's the Green Party? I think it's Howie Hawkins is his name.
I think it's Ron Swanson.
It's not Ron Swanson. Ron Swanson is a libertarian, not a member of the Green
enough.
Party. Yeah, he's a Green Party candidate for president right now. Howie Hawkins. Yes, I knew it. I knew I had it in there, right? So, but
Working
again,
clock's right twice a day.
the top of the oh, come on. The top of the ticket is, I mean, that's where we all tend to focus. But I think you're right. I think that has changed in the
For good or bad. I mean,
yeah.
who knows? We're still not out of this at all.
Yeah, in the days of Rona, as this will come to be called, the days of Rona,
The age of Rona.
right? The age of Rona. Here's the thing. So have you noticed that, like on a ground level, with this election, have you noticed more attention is being paid to local elections?
Sadly, not with the people that I was seeing on Facebook. But then again, Facebook's, I mean, this has just become a political show. It just depends on whose side you like, and you're going to bolster that side no matter what facts are thrown at you. But in certain conversations, especially with my wife, I mean, we've discussed, minority things. I know in our church group, we've talked about possibly like the governor, at least, maybe not our mayor and all that. But then again, a lot of mayoral decisions are kind of decided by city councils, sadly. So
Yeah.
that's the tough thing, is that mayor's kind of a figurehead. But at the same time, I think people are really starting to realize who makes their decisions locally. And if they don't like those decisions, they can now, as you said earlier, vote with their feet and vote them out. Or
Go elsewhere.
Or go elsewhere and say I prefer this county, how they dealt with it, so they're going to move to that county. If they have the means, fantastic, but not everybody has the means, so that's the typical argument.
Yeah, not everybody has the means. Well, that's the thing, is not everybody has the means to move states, right? And it's
a lot, especially if you've lived in Texas like me all your life. It's a lot to move out of this great country.
yeah, and it's also important to note, not everyone has the ability to move states, but moving municipalities is not as difficult. And people say, "Oh, I don't have the means to buy a house." Well, yeah, but I mean, there are apartments everywhere. There are apartment complexes. You and your wife live in an apartment right now, and it's actually. The funny thing is that I work in real estate, and I have a client right now who you would assume would never have the means to buy a house. But there are ways, right? There are ways to get you into a different location if that's what you desire to do. And just like things change from state to state within the country, things change from city to city and county to county within the state. Mm-hmm. And so there is always an option for sort of voting with your feet. Now, how dramatic that option is might vary, but there is always an option. And I know people don't like to hear that term, right? Voting with your feet, especially, I've got.
No, it has to change exactly how I want it, or else it's a bad thing.
I have a buddy of mine. He's a friend. He's a friend of mine, and you know him as well. He's very much into this whole idea of this is where I grew up. This is where my family's from, and I'm not moving from this spot. Right? That really,
We're the least mobile people in all of our history.
I don't
yet
think
we have the best means to move.
And I don't think that's in keeping with the way this country was designed. I don't think that's what this country was designed to be like. So I asked you the question. I have noticed a slight uptick to me in the relevance or prevalence of local government for this election. Facebook really isn't a good gauge, and we'll talk about Facebook here in a second. Trust me.
Facebook is not real life?
Yeah, Facebook is not real life. Twitter's not real life. What is real life is yard signs, right? If you look around for yard signs all the time, and of course during election seasons, you're going to see the big signs that show up on street corners all over the place, right? But individuals placing yard signs in there, I am seeing more local government yard signs for individual homes, right? Again, I work in real estate. I go look.
Yeah,
at
every
homes
corner is going to always have that little spot
all the time.
Yeah,
but who is putting the sign in their yard? I have seen maybe, just about 100 in all my looking around at houses, maybe about 100 yard signs for the federal government, either Trump or Biden. I've seen hundreds. I've seen almost, I mean, you might even say I've seen thousands of local election yard signs, right? And this is, again, these are individuals who are going out and buying these signs and putting them in
Right.
their yards. So it's not like the campaign is going out and putting them on street corners.
Right. And they have to get permission.
Yeah. So I do see a bigger prevalence in local elections. Now, again, that depends on where you go, right? That
Right.
depends on, obviously.
I mean, the smaller county, that the more you're going to see it. But I mean, even in, like you said, in this county, I mean, in the counties around us, I have seen it as a lot more as well. I've seen a lot more local signs, which is something that's odd to me, but that's like maybe people are just paying attention more.
Yeah.
Maybe Rona influenced them to pay attention more. Who
And,
knows?
and some districts obviously don't have their candidate's not up for election, right? So you're not going to see yard signs there. But so it depends on where you go. But I have seen a slight uptick. But this is the thing. So I think we're both in agreement that this is the way it's supposed to be. Is you're not supposed to care about, well, you're not supposed to care as much about who's in the White House as you are as who is in your local chamber of commerce.
Well, they shouldn't have as much influence.
They
as
shouldn't have as much influence
as they've been given. Yeah.
But that's not reality.
No.
That's not real life. That's not the way it is. I mean, right now we have people that are just in a panic, absolutely in a panic about Trump or Biden being in the White House, just losing it. Right? I mean, I've had people
On both sides. Let's be
on both
frank,
sides,
on
right?
both sides.
I've had people on Zoom calls sign out by saying, "Don't forget to vote. We got to get Trump out of the White House."
Click.
And I've had people, yeah, exactly. And I've had people say, I've had people tell me, if Joe Biden is in the White House, the whole country's gonna disintegrate. We're gonna go back to, all of this stuff, and things are, prices are gonna go through the roof, and we're gonna have a civil war and all. We're just talking about civil war. When was the last time you heard about? It's like we're gonna have an actual civil war.
I think when I was
right?
in grade school, I talked about it a little bit. I think it was some big subject or
You
something.
know, and it's civil war over stuff that really shouldn't matter, all that much, and it just does. So I guess my question to you is, why do you think that is? What changed, right? And again, this, you can say what changed in the long term or what changed in the short term, given the fact that you and I are both 30 years old. We haven't existed on this planet for very, very long. But what do you think, maybe in the scope of history or maybe locally, what changed that has driven our attention to this unilateral government so profoundly? I mean, legitimately, we've got some serious stress, serious anxiety happening over
People
the federal
screaming
government.
on the sidewalks.
Yeah. So why is that? Why do people care more about who's in the White House than they do about who's sitting in the mayor's office or on their city councils? What do you think? That is?
Well, in my, I've discussed this with my focus group of one, and what I think is about, I think it's mostly because we have 24-hour media, and 24-hour media has to have a show or they have no relevance. So whatever pops up, and typically the easiest one to pop up about is the federal government, the president.
Yeah.
And so we talk about it. I mean, you've seen it more often this time around just because one of the person that's currently in there loves to tweet and doesn't like to be quiet. So that's just what you're going to see, and it makes it easy fodder, and they can pretend to hate him all they want to. They love it because that gives them news. And I don't blame them. That's how they get their money. That's how they pay their mortgages. Mm-hmm. But I really do think it's the invention of the 24-hour media is the reason we focus way too much on who's in the White House. And the second part of that is we've given a lot of deference to administrative agencies to make laws that the president himself does not decide, which is my issue, because even if it's a bad decision or a good decision, I'd rather have the availability to vote that person out who made the decision. But if it's given to the administrative agencies, which are all the eggheads that know what they're talking about, and they do a lot of good laws that are actually good for America, but you can't change it by simply voting someone out. But that's the rhetoric that's given. The rhetoric given is, well, if I vote the new person in, they can change all this.
So administrative agencies, you're talking FDA, EPA,
Yeah.
that sort of stuff, right? Department of Housing.
Yeah, when I took administrative law in law school, I was very surprised at how much deference they're given. I was very appalled.
Yeah. So which of those things? So we've said social media versus deference given to administrative agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Which of those things do you think is more prevalent in the phenomenon that we're seeing right now? right?
To sway voters,
To sway voters, yeah,
social media, definitely.
for sure. You think it's social media?
I think it's social media because the administrative agencies, no one notices unless it goes against what you agree on. So once they make a law or a rule that goes against your preference, then you start noticing. But if they're going along with you, you don't notice. Just like as we've probably seen, you like the Supreme Court justices until they go against you, and then you're mad at the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, the Supreme Court, again, that's a whole other
That's a different.
that's
realm.
a whole
Sorry.
other part of this, but it is the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It kind of applies to the same thing in that we really shouldn't care that much about who the Supreme Court justices are. As a matter of fact, I think before, gosh, who was it? Bork, right? When the Bork nomination, Supreme Court justices were
barely even looked at. It was
yeah,
like,
they were
you're
barely.
in.
They were just kind of the Senate just kind of unanimously voted them
Do you
in
agree with this thing called the Constitution? Yeah.
Because-
All right. You can sway this way or that way. You're in.
because nobody cared, right? Nobody cared who the Supreme. I mean, nobody ultimately really cared that much.
Probably eggheads cared. But
So
yeah.
what changed about the court? What is it about the court that's making us so crazy?
I think that goes back to the administrative agencies because they allow them to have certain deference, and based on that deference, that changes a lot of my life. And they can do a law on the top down, and typically that's how laws in most recent history have been passed. I can't get it passed in my state. I can't get it passed in my local ordinance, so I use the courts.
Yeah. So you're gonna translate.
Whether for good or bad, it use the courts.
You're gonna translate some legalese for me. What is deference? I've used the word like I know what it means. What does it mean? What does that mean?
You go with their decision. Like, well, they looked into it, they researched it. They probably have more of a say than we do because we're fresh eyes looking into it. We'll go with their decision.
Oh, okay. So like defer.
Yeah.
Right,
So
like, I defer,
well,
okay.
they're the ones who've done the studies. They're the ones who've taken the time to figure out the answer. Therefore, their answer is probably better than our guess because we're fresh eyes looking at it.
So we'll talk about. We're on the subject of administrative agencies right now. We'll shift back to social media here in just a second. What can be done to change that? If that really is an issue, right? If that is the reason, and again, we want to focus on why we're taking our focus off of the local governments onto the federal governments. And you're saying that part of the reason is because of these administrative agencies and the power that they have, right? Mm-hmm. What can be done to reverse that? What can be done to our administrative agencies that will shift the power back into, or shift the not necessarily power, but focus? And that might involve power also, but shift the focus back onto the local stage.
That's a great question. I would say maybe the heads of certain ones could potentially be voted in. That way you can vote them out. I don't know if that's really how it works now. I think that they have to get nominated by the president at the time, and that person has to be, if they're an officer, for instance, that has to be voted in by the Senate if they're actually making director decisions.
Okay.
But the rest of it, I really just think that the biggest, easiest way to do it, which involves a lot of spending in the beginning, is taking all those out of DC and putting them into cheaper locations. That way our taxes can pay for a lot cheaper real estate in a lot of other places, and it gets them out of the constant Washington, D.C. talk. So they're not just talking amongst themselves, they're talking amongst the rest of the people, and they have to put more PSAs out there, which I think people will notice more, because typically when an agency puts a rule out, they have to put it out there for a certain period of time, and that gets voted on or that gets talked about. And if amendments need to be made, people make comments to it and they possibly amend it how those comments are, or they could just not do it at all. Yeah. But if it's outside of the Washington, D.C. realm, more people may be more prone to look at it and then maybe make decisions or make comments to see if maybe we should change that rule to tweak it to say this instead of that, or maybe less vague and more direct. Yeah. I think that may be the option. How to take care of that, I don't know. Since we're so deep in, I really don't see a way out, to be honest with you.
So couldn't these mandates, so that's the thing, is couldn't these mandates, I would think it would be better to make the mandates more vague, right? So that way you say...
But then you just leave it up for argument.
Well, but again, I think that's a good thing,
yeah.
Right? Because if you have if you well, for sure, for the lawyer in the room, right? If you have allegedly, right? If you have a mandate that's given out and the states need to carry it out, the local governments need to carry it out, then I mean that's kind of what I think, is that the higher up, right? If we have this stationed as a hierarchy where you've got the local levels down here and then you're moving up through all the way up to the national or federal government, I think that the people at the top should make the most broad and for lack of a better word, vague mandates and not really give that a lot of staying power, and then say, okay, this is what I want you to do, right? We want you to kind of operate within these parameters, and then give it to the states to make more direct decisions regarding how that applies to their state, right? So, I mean, is that even possible? Could we even do something like that?
I don't know. We could do something like that. That's a lot of change right there. You're the radical now.
Well, whatever, right? But the fact is, these these administrative agencies.
My biggest point is you just can't vote them out necessarily. And yes, you can probably get around it by, like I said, I think a lot of the officers have to be put in by a presidential nomination that it's voted on in the Congress or the Senate. And then they go in. He or she goes in. Well, yeah. Mm-hmm. So the thought is, well, like you said earlier, if I get Biden in there, therefore all these agencies will now have the right kind of mindset. But if you're a Trump person, you're like, well, they already have the right mindset because he's put them in there because he's put the best people there. Whatever. To me, you're still just putting bureaucrats to do bureaucratic things, and they typically do not care about the low person.
I'm going to make a mandate now for this podcast that says every time you refer to a Trump quote, you have to say it in that Trump
I can do
voice.
That.
With the hand gesture as well. With
best.
the okay, the best. The best. Everybody says they're the best, right? But yeah, so I think that I do think that is an issue, but I'm going to agree with you that while that is something that's more of you can't really see it. That's a more invisible kind of
and that's why people look to the higher federal government elections and don't really care about the lower ones, because like I said earlier, it made it be we're so deep. Can we even fix it? So why should I care?
Yeah, I think it's easier. That's the thing. It's easier to think about, right? So on a more basic human psychology level, it's easier to think about who's in the White House, and it's easier to get more emotionally invested in that.
To have a person to blame, right?
Yeah, there. because it's and again, it's not. You don't have to do as much work, right? You need to know Trump, Biden, Democrat, Republican, right? Right. You've got these.
What are my biases? All right, I'm going.
You've got these big tent parties, and all you need to know is that there a D or an R next to that person's name, or in some cases an L or a G or whatever, or an I or whatever it is, right? That's all we look at, right? Party affiliation is a massive influencer as to how we vote, and it's a lot easier to focus on one person.
Oh yeah, Texas themselves had to change it to where if you're mail-in or whatever, it couldn't be a straight ticket because they wanted people to at least look at the candidates.
I hate straight ticket voting, right? Now, mind you, I have my own political biases, and most of my selections fall in line with one party or another.
Mine's the birthday party.
But I hate the option to just select a straight ticket. That drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. Why? Because you're basically giving people an out. You're giving lazy people an out. And you shouldn't be lazy.
You can always say like, well, I'm just trying to be efficient, so I need to be in and out of the voting office in 2 minutes, so click.
You're voting. You're voting for your government. Make time.
It should be more important, right?
Make time, do some research, get informed, and again, get informed on who your candidates are.
Nick, it's tough to Google things.
I don't care. I don't care. Get in. And again, and I'm going to go on a little rant here, right?
I love it.
This is one of the things that I don't like about get out the vote campaigns. Mm-hmm. I hate get out the vote. Now, this is not me saying that you shouldn't vote. Okay, let me be very clear. Go vote. Absolutely go vote. Canceled. But the get out the vote campaigns that you say, go vote. Go vote. You just go vote, right? That is so lazy. That's not what the campaign should say, right? They should be more deep. They should say, listen,
get informed.
Go get informed. Go research. Go look at my policies on the issues. Go look at my opponent's policies on the issues. And by the way, go look at everybody on your ticket. There are all sorts of services out there where you can legitimately, my producer Hayden has one up on his computer right now. You can literally type in your address and it will show you a sample ballot for who's going to be on the ballot, where what that office does.
What's that site?
Right? I think it's what's it called, Hayden? It's called Ballotpedia. I think is what it's called. Right? Hayden's looking that up, right? Yeah, Ballotpedia, right? But again, there's more than just
say
that.
If people want to look it up themselves, now that I have a way.
There's more than just that. Go look up who you're voting for, right? And ignore the top of the ticket. Let's be honest, you've already made your decision on who you're voting for at the top of the ticket.
Yeah, I'm always kind of laughing when I hear the undecided voters. I'm like, who's undecided?
There's nobody undecided. That's ridiculous. That's a pipe dream. Undecided voters, right? We're not fighting for the middle. It's really a matter of just getting out your base. But that's beside the point. The fact is, do not just go vote. right? If you haven't done any research as to who these candidates are, then leave it blank.
Actually, I used
Leave
to
it
do
blank.
that all the time, even when I was voting since I've been voting since 18 because I got lucky enough to actually vote my first time during an election year,
Yeah.
a real election year, and I actually wouldn't vote for people who didn't have were unopposed. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, you've already had
Yeah,
your
you've already
win,
won. You're
and
unopposed.
so I'm not going to vote for
Well,
you.
my thing is, I'm wanting to change it to where we can vote. What I say is, if I don't know who that person is, I'm gonna leave that part of the ticket blank.
Yeah.
And you can do that. You're not obliged to vote for every single person. You can abstain from voting on any office. But go and do your research, right? This is an election. This is who runs your life. This is who runs your country, your city, your state, your municipality. Do a little bit of research and at least figure out where they are on issues that you care about. And I'm not saying that you have to write a thesis, but I'm saying get in there and be a little bit informed before you just waltz into an election so that you can vote for Trump or Biden, or you can check Republican or Democrat full ticket. That blows my mind that that's even an option. That really drives me nuts. And I mean, I really think that you should get in and you should make an educated decision, regardless of who you vote for. And let me be very clear, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I don't care. I don't care who you vote for, but vote on it the basis of being informed. Don't vote on the basis of, well, I like the D better than the R, so right.
I mean, D comes first in the alphabet.
That
so
drives me bananas. Anyway, my producer is telling me right now he's waving at me saying we're gonna run out of camera battery. Right? So we're gonna take a quick break here, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss a little bit more of the social media, and then we'll get into some of the actual local elections that are going to be happening here. We'll discuss who those candidates are, whether you are eligible to vote for them, and whether why you should or shouldn't vote for them. Right? We're gonna make you informed on the issues. I'm not here to give my opinion about it. I'm just here to make sure that you have as much information as possible, so that when you go into the ballot box, when you go into your pollster, you're able to make a decision based on the candidate, not based on a party identification. Which again, we could fill up the entire podcast with me just screaming about full ticket voting. But we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. We'll be back here with you in just a moment. All right, welcome back, guys, to Local Matters. You're here with Nick and James, the bad boys of local municipality government. We make district voting sexy. Right?
We try.
We try. So I think when we left off, we were talking about the reasons why local governments get in a bad shake in favor of the federal government, and we touched a lot on, talking about regulatory bodies, I guess it is, right? So executive regulatory bodies giving power and stuff. But that really, again, I think that's sort of the in the background type of stuff, right? That's what's happening on the side when it comes to politics. What's really right in front of us is media and social media. And I think you agree that that's really the biggest thing. The reason why we like to focus to the top of the ticket, because it's easier, right? It doesn't require as much work, doesn't require as much research, and it's always right in front of you, especially in election years. Right now, I just got rid of Facebook.
And the swag. I mean,
the swag.
They want to have the shirts. They want to have the signs.
You want to get that big old red hat. Look at that, right? Or for Biden, I don't know. Does Biden have a hat?
I don't know if he has a hat. He definitely has plenty of shirts. He has those fly shirts now after the Pence and Kamala Harris.
Yeah, the fly shirts, all that. So yeah, you got to get the swag, and the thing is that's all being inundated on social media. Now I just got rid of Facebook, and I couldn't be happier. I will tell you, I've officially have no personal social media. Now I do have professional social media accounts, which other people manage for me. But I do not engage in personal social media, and I will tell you that was one of the best decisions. I'm so relieved that I don't deal with that. Now, this is a whole other topic about social media, but I will say that 150,000% contributes to...
It's a lot of percentages.
To this, it is, right? It 100% contributes to this idea of we focus on the big election and we neglect the elections that really matter more to us, right? Yeah. The elections that are more going to directly affect how you live your life on a day-by-day basis. Most people are checking a box and they don't even know who this person is. They haven't investigated the candidate.
But it has a D and an R next to it.
But it's got a D and an R, right? And I think a big reason for that is social media, because social media has presented... and I don't want to say that it's presented this dichotomy of you can only vote for D and R. guys, the fact is, the way we hold elections in the United States of America, that's just the way it is, right? We hold elections based on a plurality of votes, meaning you get the seat if you get 51% of the votes. That is naturally going to produce a two-party system. So I'm not here to rail against the two-party system. We could do a separate episode about that if we wanted to.
I don't think you ever finished that one.
That is the way it is. But the fact is that social media has blown this into your face, right? You've got Democratic friends and you've got Republican friends, and they're posting all this stuff constantly about the big election, and nobody. I mean, when I was on Facebook, when I was on social media, I rarely, unless you follow those people directly, you never see anything about your local municipalities.
No.
You never see anything about local government elections. You never see anything about state government elections. Now, occasionally, if you're in a certain area, for example, if you go on YouTube, right? You go on YouTube, I see a lot of advertisements for example, John Cornyn, who's the
Well, if you live in Austin, you probably know a lot about it,
Yeah.
because that's where our state representatives meet.
Yeah,
So, is that a friend who lived there, and that's when they really know about it? It's in Austin. It's kind of like about the smaller representatives of the Congress if you live in D.C.
Yeah, and I see a lot of advertisements for Candace Valenzuela, who's running for the 24th district right now. Which that again, that goes back to the fact that YouTube knows where I live, and it puts that, which is creepy by itself, right? It's super creepy. But
don't say something 3 times around your phone, Google will pick it up.
I'm seeing a lot of those sorts of things, so they do exist. I'm not saying those sorts of ads don't exist. And John Cornyn he's a U.S. senator, so he's not even on the state or local level. But you see a lot of these different things kind of sparingly, but if you just turn on a social media feed, a Twitter feed, an Instagram feed, a TikTok feed, a Facebook feed, you're constantly inundated.
Bunch of hard opinions on both sides of the aisle.
With Trump Biden. Like it matters. Like, I mean, and they're trying to convince you that it matters, and more importantly, that it should matter. Right? It should matter who the president is. And that is the biggest problem that I have with the messaging on our media right now, is the fact that who the president is really going to make a difference. Because it shouldn't. Now, it does, and a lot of that was because of what we talked about earlier with the executive branch and kind of these
It's grown a lot.
These separate entities that are actually implementing law. It's grown quite a bit, which, again, that's kind of in the background. But the biggest thing is that we have a 24-hour media cycle, and we're literally getting our news from our friends.
Yeah.
We're literally getting our news from people who have no business giving news.
Hey, I got an iPhone. I'm just gonna record this real quick.
We're getting.
There's some. Let's be fair. Some good things have come from people just recording and sending it, because you have a lot faster connection to the world than we did even 20 years ago. So that there has been some good, but a lot of it has been trash.
Yeah. So how do we turn that around? How do we? Is there a way to fix social media, or is this just how we live now?
I think it just has to. You just have to unplug, to be honest with you. And I'm not talking about maybe like deactivating or deleting your Facebook or whatever social media you use. I myself don't have a Twitter.
I'm 100%
never had
advocating
one. Never really found a reason
delete
to need
your
one.
Facebook account. Right.
That's his hard opinion.
Yeah,
Let's
sorry,
take him down.
Sorry.
There goes our Facebook stuff.
Yeah.
No.
Gosh, we just
my
lost
thing
another
is,
sponsor.
I've seen there's been certain people in the media, and I'm not going to name them because, again, you could probably watch all their shows and have fun with it. Some people do unplug for 2 weeks, some even a month, just to unplug and come back to it. Or maybe you could try what I do. I have Facebook not on my phone. I do have a Facebook, but it's not on my phone, because if it's on my phone, I'm constantly looking at it, and I got this beautiful wife over here, and I'm looking at my phone, not looking at my wife or talking to her, pretending she doesn't exist, and she's pretty much the same distance you are from me. Mm-hmm. That's not fair to her. It's not fair to anybody else you're in relationships with of any kind of sort. So try your best to, when you go on Facebook, you're going on Facebook. That's what I do. So that's why I have it on my laptop only. If I want to be on Facebook, I get my laptop. If I don't care. But we've made it so much of our lives that's the issue. We live through Facebook, and we live through people's highlights instead of realizing this person may be broken. This person may not be having a great day, but their Twitter feed shows a great day, and that's all we see. And that's what we're kind of seeing with the national news and the national election. We see only the highlights we want to see, and we downgrade the ones we don't want to see. So if it benefits our base, we're looking at that all the time. Yeah, rah, rah, rah. If it doesn't, all right, let's start belittling the person that votes differently than Biden or votes differently than Trump. And that's just a sad reality we're in. I think it's just unplug. It started out as something great, and we've screwed it up just like humans do.
I had a friend who made a really good suggestion about if you're going to use social media, right? My solution, and I am unashamedly saying you should just not use social media. I think when social media hit the floor, it was a really cool, novel idea. I don't think anyone could have foreseen what it's become.
No.
But for both good and bad.
I mean, that's how Barack Obama got elected the first time. He utilized social media for the first time in a really well way, and that's what got him. And that's how Trump is getting his base out. He's used social media. Hate him or love him, it's working.
That's what it's doing.
And I don't know if it's the better, to be honest with you.
So the solution that my friend came up with was click the links, right?
Read them.
If you're going to be on Facebook and you're going to see an ad, right? You're going to see an ad that has a highlighted or what's the word that I'm looking for, right? Gosh, it'll come back to me, right? A headline, right? You see an ad that's got a headline. A lot of people just read the headline and they keep scrolling.
Right.
There's just the constant scrolling.
People are good at making those headlines too.
The solution is just take a moment. If you see a link that interests you, click on it. Go, read it. Read the whole story, right? If you see about a political candidate that says something like, I don't know,
Trump said blank.
Trump said blank. Well, then click on it, right? And again,
it's a good chance he said
this is going into how do we get focus? How do we get more focused on the local stuff? Well, because the local stuff is not going to be found on that feed, right? You're not going to find a lot of stuff on your local feed. But if you click on the links, a lot of times you'll kind of go digging a little bit more, and you'll see, okay, what local candidates are related to this particular party, or what local candidates are connected to this particular piece of legislation, and then you can investigate them. Right? The reality is, if you want to learn about local candidates, you have to go to them, right? They're not coming to you, right? So the national...
They don't have to. Like you said,
exactly.
you just click a box. If it has a D or an R, you're clicking that box.
The national market, right? The federal government you're constantly inundated with information about the federal government, the Trump administration, Biden administration, Obama administration, Clinton administration, Calvin Coolidge's administration, like all this different stuff. It's constantly coming to you, and you really don't all that Coolidge propaganda, right? And you really don't have to do anything to see those headlines. But if you want to see your local government, who is your council representative for your district? Who is your mayor? Who is currently, going to the, who is currently going to be your representative at the state, in the state House of Representatives or the state Senate? You've got to go to them. Right, you got to look them up. You've got to do that. So when you see those ads, and
Nick, that's a lot of work.
I know. Quit being lazy. This is your government. This is your country. This is and again, not necessarily even your country. This is your city.
But I'm busy taking pictures for the gram.
Care enough about your community to do the research, right? And that really is a thing. So local communities are really where I think the value is. And you got two sides of the option.
Well, I think the other thing is too, not to interrupt you there, but is know when your city council meets and possibly watch it.
Yeah,
I mean,
watch a city council. Go to a city council.
That's how your special taxes are done. If you're like, well, for instance, when I lived in Arlington, there was a vote to up the taxes to pay for a certain stadium. Mm-hmm. I was not cool with that because it was tax dollars going to pay for something else. Yeah. Eventually, I lost anyway, so it doesn't matter, and I voted with my feet. I left Arlington.
Yeah. Which stadium was that? Was that the big one with the round ball, or the big stadium with the lemon shaped ball?
The round ball.
The round ball.
The lemon shaped ball was already done before I got there.
Yeah. All right.
The one across the street from Walmart.
The one across the street from the round ball, right? Yeah, exactly. So. I mean, I think that's an important deal. But again, you vote with your feet. You move to a different city. Yeah. And really, there seems to be, and this is, again, I think also a product of social media, you've got two sides of how people view politics on a sort of a broad philosophical level. You have people that view the kind of the government is us philosophy, right? Yeah. Where the most important thing is the community as a whole, meaning the whole country, right? Yeah. How we as a country move. And then you have the other side of the coin, which is the staunch libertarian side of the coin, meaning the most important organism in government is the individual, right? Your individual person. I don't think that's true. I think the most important organism in government is families and local communities, right? I think the most important organism is your family, right? How this affects, how you run your household, right? Because households love it or hate it, is kind of does run like a political organism. There's negotiation, there are rules, there should be rules, there's standards, there's structure. So that
I've heard you can actually run it more like communism because the people at the top, the parents, are the ones making decisions for you.
Yeah, right. Your family's
Maybe
your own
that's
little,
not
your
all
own
that it
little
works.
commune. Your own little commune, right? So you've got that, and then above that, you have your local ordinances. You have your churches. You have your city council offices. That
Your bowling leagues.
Yeah, your bowling leagues. That should be what drives politics forward, right? The problem is that in the modern social media where it's just consume information, you're only left with the two options, right? The individual is the key organism, or the entire country is the key organism to politics. And that's just not true.
Maybe that's the root right there. You said it pretty well. Consume.
Mm-hmm.
We consume a lot. Do we retain anything?
Yeah.
Because I consumed a lot of legalese and legal laws whenever I took different tests in law school. I couldn't tell you half of them because I didn't have to retain a lot of it until it was important.
Yeah. No, for sure. But I think really that is the key issue here is take more time, focus on the community around you. Take more time, focus on what's going on in your local area. Because again, that's the stuff that directly
Maybe watch your local news instead of watching
Watch your
just
local
the
news
CNN,
instead of watching the national
MSNBCs,
news, right?
the Foxes, whoever. I
no-
know there's more, but I'll do the main three.
know what's going on in your area. And in order to do that, you're going to have to do some research, right? If you want to look up who's running for your particular state representative district, you're going to have to look that up. If you want to know who is running for mayor, you're going to have to look that up. That's not coming to you.
There's an interesting story I have. I was actually looking into this because I wasn't sure if I was going to be there a while, to running for, I believe it was a city council when I lived in Nacogdoches. And they were telling me whenever I was looking into how do I apply and things like that a student actually almost won a couple years back. Mm-hmm. And all he did was actually just go door to door to announce, I am so-and-so, I'm running for this, vote for me or not vote for me. I just wanted you to see my face and know who I am.
Yep.
And he almost won. He almost beat a 2 or 3 time incumbent who is definitely a professional. He is just some little low student.
Yeah.
So sometimes something that simple is pretty cool.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, block walking is a big part of local governance, right? I've done a lot of research on local, local political offices, and they love to do the block walking. They love to go around door to door, shake people's hands, and make it work. And again, that's a good thing, right? Personally knowing the person who's in charge of your government, that's a good thing. Okay, and we tend to focus again on the big dramatic stuff because again, there's more drama in the national election. But really, the stuff that matters, it's the Leslie Nopes of the world that matter the most, right? It's the people that are running your city council. It's the Parks and Recreation Department, right? It's the local school.
Full disclosure,
district.
we're getting paid for the plug.
Yeah. Local school districts, local boards, those are the people that matter. And the other thing that's important to note is those are going to be the national electors of the future, right? You got to start somewhere. And so if you have certain political beliefs and you want to see the country, right? You want to see the country change culturally or politically into those political beliefs. The best thing you can do is find people that share those local beliefs and elect them to local office. Why? Because local office becomes state office, becomes national office, could eventually become the presidency. The fact is that you have to plant the seeds in order to get the corn, and if you want to get the right fruits for your labor, you have to start at the ground level. And people don't recognize that, right? People wonder how
is this city so bad? Well, the president doesn't decide this city. Let's be real.
Exactly.
They shouldn't be either.
And
that's my issue. Is like Baltimore does not run like Tyler, Texas, or something. Just making some random. Does it run like Los Angeles, California? It's like no, they decide that. The president should not be deciding all that.
Yeah. And we've run, we've run this topic quite a bit. And again, this is the purpose of my podcast. So obviously, I'm going to talk about the joys of federalism. But I want to kind of narrow it in. And I've got you on the podcast for a reason. I know that you think it's just because you had nothing better to do, which is true. You didn't have anything better to do. Nonetheless, I do have you on for a reason. We got a lot of local, or not local, but state, right? So in the state of Texas, which is where we are right now, we have a lot of elections coming up for what am I looking for? For justices, right? So
Yeah, Supreme Court justices.
The Texas Supreme Court has a lot of vacancies and a lot of seats that are available to fill. In fact, Hayden, do you know how many of those, how many districts, how many courts elections are going to be posted? Right? There's got to be.
There's a good chunk.
There's a good chunk. There's like 6, right? So there's 6, and again that would be
Yeah, like a number. Yeah.
yeah, that would be.
Oh yeah.
Oh, in November, yeah, that'd be just look up that ballot and it'll be able to tell you. There's a bunch. I know that right now for the Texas Supreme Court, the Chief Justice is up for re-election, right? Hecht, I think is his name, right? See again, you should know this kind of stuff, right? And so he's up for re-election. So I want to talk to you about this. What do state and local courts do? Because obviously we've got the Supreme Court thing happening, that whole drama is going on. Where do these sorts of courts fit into that structure? Because court structure is something that a lot of people don't understand.
Like what do you mean fits into this certain court structure?
So what's the difference, for example, in a state appellate court? Because we hear about I think Texas is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Fifth Circuit,
right? Yeah. But that's federal stuff. So
Correct.
What's the difference between a federal appellate court and like a state appellate court? Or really, what's the difference between, how do we know whether a case goes to a federal appellate court or a state Supreme Court?
Right? Okay, so Texas is a little different. But the basic of it is for federal, it's usually under federal crimes. Yeah, but if again, those who are in civil procedure, have fun. If it's a state law, but it's 2 different people, like for instance, I'm in Texas, person's from Louisiana, and it's even a state kind of crime, but I want to have diversity, then I could go to a federal court. That way, it's under different kind of rules, different kind of regulations, but it's still under that state law. It's fine. Most of the time, the way it's broken down is federal issues go to federal court. Yeah. State law issues stay in the state, especially if the 2 people who were the ones alleging this person did something to them stays in the state court, especially if they're both from Texas or whatever state you're from.
Okay.
That's how essentially it works for us.
Okay.
For Supreme Court, Texas Supreme Court, mostly...
We have 2, don't we?
Yeah, we have a Court of Criminal Appeals and the Supreme Court. Court of Criminal Appeals is the Supreme Court essentially for criminal issues, unless it's juvenile. Juvenile usually is considered a civil matter, and that's typically decided into the Supreme Court, in our Supreme Court of Texas. Now, the Supreme Court of Texas can decide issues that the Criminal Court of Appeals has decided and decide something different instead of doing that. Like, for instance, changing the whole realm, changing the holding or whatever. Okay. But typically, that's where it stops.
Okay. And how many justices reside on both of those courts?
That's a great question. I think it's 9 as well.
It's 9. Okay, so it's 9 here, and that's not always the same. So state courts don't have to. And again, there aren't any rules, as it turns out. There aren't any rules as to how many justices can be on the Supreme Court of the United States. But
there's not an amendment to it, buddy. You can pack it if you want.
There's no amendment, but state courts don't necessarily follow the, I guess we won't call it a rule, a precedent of 9 justices.
I don't think so.
Okay,
but I could be completely wrong, and feel free to tell me how wrong I am.
I don't know, man. That's why you're on the podcast. You're the legalese guy, right?
Never had to make a case in front of the Supreme Court, so hopefully I can stay away from that unless it's a good thing.
What kind of stuff is this going to affect? So first of all, is Texas unique? And you might not know the answer to this. Is Texas unique because you vote for judges and justices in Texas?
That part I don't know because I never lived in another state.
Yeah.
But I do find it very odd, in my opinion, that we do vote for the justices, and those justices ride under a party. Because it's kind of like politicizing the party if you look at it.
Yeah, it's politicizing
the court, which is something that I would like to avoid. Granted, even if it was a governor selecting it, if that governor has a D or an R next to his name, currently ours has an R. If he appointed them like it works in the federal level, then maybe it still would be the exact same thing. But I think there's probably a better way to do it. How that is, maybe just by philosophy.
Yeah.
Not by... And what you've decided previously, like for instance, you were a lower court judge. You've decided on these matters, and people like how you've decided on certain matters.
Yeah.
But I don't think having a D or R next to your name is a great idea for a justice in our Supreme Court.
I would agree. So is there a place that you can go, and I mean, you might not know the answer to this either, but there's a place you can go where you can look at, so let's say we've got this candidate for the Texas Supreme Court spot 3, right? And this is the person that's running. Is there a place where you can go where you can check out their legal record and you can see how they've weighed on separate issues? Is that
I bet you can just go into court decisions. It's probably all. It's. I mean, if it's decided on the court, it's all public.
okay?
It may not be as easy to traverse into it like a Google.
Yeah.
But I'm assuming it's. If you were ever in the legal world, probably on Westlaw.
Yeah.
It's a great site. It tells you everything of what you need to know on most cases, and it lets you go to a lot of things and do a lot of cool tricks with it. But I bet you, because it's, like I said, decided on certain rules, it's public domain.
Okay. All right. So yeah, this stuff is a matter of public record, which again, you should look into. You should do it. So my question, I guess, would be this: what are we voting for? So when we vote for a judge, and a lot of people find it odd, and I find it odd as well, that we're voting for judges and justices, right? I like the idea of them being appointed, right? And I know a lot of people have an issue with that too. I like the idea of them being appointed, because when I vote for a judge, I don't exactly know what I'm voting for. Because here's the fact, right? Judges don't make policy, or they're not supposed to.
Not supposed
right?
to.
They're not supposed to make policy, right? So they're not supposed to make law.
Call balls and strikes.
Yeah, exactly. They're not supposed to make law. And I am under the impression that I will never have to be in front of one of these judges, right? Or at least I'm going to try not
Lord
to.
willing.
Yeah, Lord willing, I'll never have to be in front of them. So if I'm not planning on being a criminal, and thus, having any
Alleged criminal.
Yeah, if I'm not planning on being a criminal, and thus never having to encounter one of these judges or have them rule on me, why vote? What's the purpose of voting for a judge? How exactly does who's in this particular spot on the Supreme Court affect my life? For the Texas Supreme Court, right?
Well, I mean, the flip side of the coin, what you said, how you're not a huge fan of, you'd rather have an appointment instead of the vote. But the vote for that side of the coin does allow the people of the state of Texas to decide that matter and say, like, I want a justice who follows this type of the law, or rules in this way on certain matters. You're not going to get one that says, like, yeah, I was cool with this, and now boom, this drug's now legal. Like, no, they're not going to do that. It's not how it works in our courts and in our state. But I think right now it's mostly who has the D or the R next to your name. If that's your bias, you're going to vote for that. Yeah. But I do see the side of you're letting people vote in those they wish to rule over them in the legal matter. Those who are going to decide their fate. Those who are going to say, was that a legal search? Was that not a legal search? Something as simple as that. And you can read, according to whatever blurbs that people put out on, this judge decided this at one time, so there's a good chance they'll never reverse. And maybe it's something you hate. Maybe it's something you like. I can see the argument to vote for your justices. Yeah. But I just don't see the benefit of voting under a party.
So what is the status of legal precedent in Texas? What is, I guess the question is, how does the judicial branch in Texas relate to the executive and the legislature? Does that have any influence at all over how laws are carried out?
Or nationally?
No, not nationally, on the state level, right? So there's the Texas Supreme Court.
They decide it matters for Texas.
Rules one way, yeah. So they decide that, and that is how this law is to be executed or carried out from that point forward.
Right, and if it's somehow still unconstitutional from that, then the person, if they don't like their answer, can attempt to have a writ sent to, and it's essentially like an application to the Supreme Court of the United States to see if Texas is undoing or overbearing on certain laws that are infringing on certain rights. Okay. But essentially, the Texas Supreme Court is the law of our land in this great country / state.
The Republic.
Exactly. And that's just how it operates. I do believe that our Supreme Court does operate the same way as the United States Supreme Court is. They have the right to say no. So if they don't want to take a certain case, they don't have to. They're going to say, yep, we've decided something close to this matter a few years ago. We're going to stick with that. We're not going to take a new venture. Too bad, so sad. That's how it works.
Yeah. So I guess.
But then again, as we've learned, that has political ramifications.
Yeah.
So that's a different way of having to do it, unlike the Supreme Court of the United States.
So Texas does have, when you say constitution, it's important to note that Texas does have its own constitution.
Correct.
There is a constitution of Texas, which, by the way, is gigantic. Have you seen it? It's a massive document. The Constitution of the United States is like what, 10 pages, maybe? right, including amendments
We
and
have
all
a
that.
constitution?
Yeah, exactly.
we're
So,
right.
the Constitution of the United States is a very small document. It doesn't really have a lot of prescriptions, but the Texas Constitution is giant.
Left no room for vagary
It's
there.
ridiculous. Yeah. So, and that's actually something that I'm not a big fan of, and I love my state. Don't get me wrong, I do love Texas, but that's one thing that if
I think it actually says the appropriate amount of Skittles is 65 per bag.
God, yeah, if I were king of the world, a constitution would never be as large as the one we have here. But all that is to say, what is the relationship to the Texas Supreme Court to the United States Constitution? Obviously they have to abide by that, right?
Correct.
So if something is constitutionally according to the Constitution of Texas, they also do have to take into account, is it constitutional as per the Constitution of the United States?
Correct. United States, essentially the basic element is the United States sets a floor. You cannot go below this part of the right, but a state can go as far as it wants to when it comes to it. So for instance, let's just take California, for instance, when it comes to the easiest one for guns. They have a right to bear arms, correct. Constitution allows that. But they can say, in our state, we're not going to allow more capacity in a magazine than 10. Well, you're still allowing guns.
Yeah.
And you're not, and you just say, you have a limit. That's fine. That's literally constitutional. But their laws do not infringe upon the actual constitutional right.
So, and this might be a hypothetical that you have no idea what could happen.
Here we go.
And I mean, and again, there's
fantasy worlds.
there are a surprising amount of those in politics. There's a surprising amount of what if this happened? You'd be like, I have no idea.
That's most of our 24-hour media.
We'd have to figure that out, right?
Some have said.
What would happen if the state constitution of Texas, right? So there's a ruling, or there's a parameter within the state constitution of Texas that infringes upon something in the United States Constitution. If that were to happen, I'm not even sure if it could, but if that were to happen, what would we have to? Would we be forced to amend the Texas Constitution?
Let's just say, for instance, because it's a fun hypothetical, the state constitution of Texas, for some reason, still had on their books, slavery is legal. Okay, as we all know, we've thankfully gotten rid of that.
Thankfully.
But the federal court, when it comes to it, is the supreme law of the land. So if anything is actually overridden by the United States Supreme Court or the Constitution, you can have it on the books all you want to. It's going to be invalid, because if the minute you actually enforce that we're as rightfully so, especially in the case of slavery, the feds would come and go, yep, can't do that. And I don't care what else you do. You definitely can't do that. And we're going to stop every bit of that.
Yeah. So it's a law that's just not enforceable.
Exactly. Right? You can have it on the books all you want to. It's not going to be enforced. The minute you try, you have a multitude of litigation on your hands.
There would be political ramifications if you did have laws like that on the books.
You just get berated in the court.
They just wouldn't be enforceable.
You probably deservedly go into financial ruin by the amount of court costs you would have.
That's interesting. So I'm gonna kind of see if we can wrap up this little section here in a nice tidy little bow. Why should people vote for the courts? And why should people be interested in how they vote on the courts?
Well, the courts have your biggest impact, really. I mean, policy is policy and it can be changed from candidate to candidate, but precedent sets a lot of things, and precedent, as we've kind of said, means like that's our new regulation. That's what we've set as, when it comes to this kind of question, here's our answer, the automatic answer. Of course, there's always some weird little rules and some exceptions, but that's the overall arching rule. So that person in the court can set a thing that will have 20 years of ramifications that some small little politician, especially a state senator, may not have that kind of influence, because there's a not written law. Because until a case is overturned, that is your standard. And if you don't like the standards that a certain judge is putting out, you want a different judge in there, or in our case, justice, put in there to hopefully eventually undo that precedent and have a case that comes up before him or her, and they change that precedent. Because that dictates the laws that we can allow in Texas. That is the reason why a certain stop in Texas, I believe it's the Lopez court case, a cop cannot keep you there just to keep you there in order to get a dog sniff going on, because they may think you have some drugs in your car. If your stop is done, I pulled you over for speeding, here's your citation or your warning for speeding, I have to let you go unless something has tipped me off that you may have drugs. I can think that you're a drug lord, but I have no proof, no smell to prove it. So I just wait for a dog to get there. Well, if that's not a part of the stop, Texas has said that is an illegal stop. Even if you find a mountain of drugs in that car, doesn't matter. You went further then you're actually allowed.
And that was established based on court precedent.
Court precedent. Well, the court decided it, and that has now decided what a legal stop is in Texas.
Yeah. So what you basically just told everyone is, if you're a drug lord, you have a big incentive to vote for your justice. That is not true. That's you have an incentive to vote for your justices regardless.
You're a free American, do what you want.
Regardless of who you are, right? Because again, while the courts don't make policy, precedent does matter. Right? Precedent does matter in how laws are enforced.
They're the ones who call the balls and strikes of that law.
Absolutely.
Because if that's a bad law that's put in place, they can say, well, this law is not constitutional according to our Texas Constitution or the United States Constitution, so they vote it down. They don't replace it with a new law. They just say, that one's bad. At least that's how I think it should be done.
Yeah.
Some who insert themselves and say, this is probably a better way to say it or rewrite it into it. I think you're making some policy from the bench. It's not a great idea, but there's other side that says it's a great thing. And to be fair to that side, they have had some good things come out of that, so I can't totally negate it.
All right. And what is your policy on how people should vote with the justices? Do you think, and again with Texas, we allow R's and D's on the ballot for justices? Do you think they should pay attention to that, or do you think that they should do a little bit of research for their Supreme Court justices?
Well, if I had a perfect world, I would take the R's and D's away and let you vote to specifically on their judicial philosophy and what they see as maybe as good decisions or bad decisions that Texas made, and vote on that. Besides that, the R's and D's shouldn't matter, because when it comes to the law, a lot of things aren't really R&D matters, because you can say, well, I like this, and that may be more the conservative ideal, and they say, well, this seems more fair on this side, and that's more the liberal ideal. And it's the exact same judge.
Yeah.
As we've seen in our, for instance, Supreme Court justices, John Roberts has gone one way, and he's gone the other way. And that was one put in by a conservative. Well,
we'll call him a, what's the word? A constructionist?
Yeah,
right?
sure. Yeah, sure. But I mean, that's the thing, is when it comes to laws, it's easy to see the better part of the law and not whenever you're in that mode. But it's tough when you put it to an actual political philosophy, because then it just kind of gets watered down.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to get into the nitty gritty, because again, this is local matters. So I do want to talk about some local things that are actually going on. And we are again in an election. And
Allegedly.
we talked about the justices. And like I said, Hayden, did you ever figure out how many justices are up for election right now? It's a bunch. It's a bunch, friends. And it's a significant portion of the court, right? So we talked about that. Let's talk about an actual legislative election in the state of Texas, right? Because again, we are in the state of Texas here. And so we'll talk about one of those districts here in just a second. We're going to take a quick break though, and we will be back to discuss that before we wrap this thing up. So I'll see you guys back here after just a little bit. All right, friends, welcome back to the Local Matters podcast. You are here with Nick and Justice James. We're just
gotten promoted during the show.
I know, man, yeah, exactly. You didn't before. You just taken the bar, and now you're already
magically passed. In
exactly.
This. I like this
right?
world.
Yeah, we're gonna have your Senate hearing here in a little bit.
Oh goodness, this is not good.
We had an interesting conversation about the part of the election, part of the ticket that's going to involve the judicial branch. Because here in Texas, one of the interesting things about our local being state, right, about our state, is that we do elect justices and judges. So you do see a lot of signs running around for judges and justices. It's important to know why you're voting for those people, what exactly you're voting for, who you're voting for. That's why I brought James onto the podcast, so he could kind of break that down for us. It's a really interesting concept. But it's also important to note that there are legislative seats that are open. And, in the Texas legislature, they serve for a 2-year term. And you got to reelect them. So there are plenty of districts in Texas right now that are up for election. And we've got to make sure that we understand who we're voting for, what our district is, and why we should care, right? Why should we care about who represents us in the Texas House of Representatives? So, James, I'm going to ask your opinion. Why do you think we should care about the Texas House of Representatives when we have a House of Representatives in the federal government?
Well, the Texas House of Representatives likely will decide the matters dealing specifically with Texas only, making our own independent laws. Like I said earlier, whatever the Constitution's floor is on certain things, we're either creating a higher ceiling or we're going back closer to the floor, depending on whatever law it may be. While it's great to have those who are fighting for you at the federal government level, in my opinion, it's gotten too big. We shouldn't have to worry too much about them because who really decides our matters should be our state senators and state state representatives.
On another note, right? That's sort of a philosophical note. On a more brass tacks, kind of hard data note. It's also important to understand that your taxes, portion of that taxes, is not going to the federal government. It's going to your state and local areas. And so, one of the most important things about your state congressional unit, your state Congress, or whatever it is. I don't think anyone calls it a parliament in the United States, but your state Congress.
We definitely should.
Your state House, your state Senate, they're responsible for passing a budget. And so your tax dollars are going to certain things at the state level, and these are the people that are responsible for determining what that money goes to. In my opinion, that really is the most important part of Congress, of any Congress, is the fact that they pass a budget, which affects not just your taxes, but also where those taxes are going. If your state's in a deficit, that's largely the responsibility of your state's Congress. Same thing with the National Congress and local city councils do the same thing.
And I think especially now, I mean, just to go on a quick point, I mean, with what Rona has done to even our state, it is more prevalent or more important to notice what your money is going to either get us out of the hole we're dug in certain situations, or to maybe put some taxes and have those set as an emergency fund for other things in case something like this ever hits again. Texas is actually pretty good about the rainy day fund. Whether that's actually utilized, that's a whole nother argument. But we're actually good on that part, so it's really important to have someone who's really fiscally minded on at least that issue. The rest of it, have fun with. I don't care.
And fiscal conservatism is one of those things that a lot of people like to purport to be for, because it's obviously responsible, right? It's responsible to save money. It's not good to run a deficit. We understand that. But there are people out there, I understand, that care a little bit less about that, and they just want to know where the money's going, right? Is the money being spent?
Yeah, show me receipt.
Exactly. That's also the responsibility of your Congress. So it's not just, is the Congress saving me money? It's the money that I am giving them. Where is that going, right? What's that?
It's going to study how fast grass grows.
What is that funding? Yeah, exactly. Is that funding things that are actually worthwhile? Is that funding things that are actually going to help me and my family in my district? So we're going to talk about one of the more hotly contested races right now in Texas. That is going to be House District 65.
65.
Right? The fighting 6-5. As Stephen, that's what Stephen Colbert used to do that, where they'd talk about local district municipal. Yeah, exactly. And he would always call it the fighting whatever. So this is the fighting 65th, right? But this is House District 65. It's interesting because this is a swing district. So in the last
does that
election,
mean there's swings in it, or
there are lots of swings in this district.
I just want to make sure our listeners know.
Porch swings, right? Park swings, all kinds of swings. Right?
I better have a R swing and a D swing.
What actually this applies to is the fact that not a lot of people recognize this, because again, we all tended to focus on the national election back in 2018.
Yeah.
Was that Texas's state Congress actually trended more purple in a pretty dramatic way.
Yeah.
The Republicans lost about 12 seats in the last election.
Blue wave.
Yeah, it was very much a blue wave in the state of Texas. Now, the Republicans still do hold the majority in the House of Representatives. They still hold the chair there. But it is definitely trending purple on a state level. One of the surprise flipped seats was this 65th district. Right, the 65th House District had been held by a Republican for a very long time, and it was overturned by our incumbent, Michelle Beckley. Right, Michelle Beckley is a Democrat who, back in 2018, was elected to her first term as a Texas House representative, and she is up for re-election this year. So this is an important thing because it demonstrates sort of, is this trend, right, this trend towards more blue seats in the Texas House of Representatives going to stick? Or are we going to kind of pull back on that? So where is this trending? Where is this going? Now, I will say this: there's a lot about the Texas House of Representatives that just baffles me. There's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of practices that they have that I can't wrap my mind around. Right? One of this is they tend to the Republicans, which logically, right, they have the majority, tend to not like it when you run against an incumbent, which if you're I mean, I can see that. I can see the case if it's your own party, right? If you're a Republican, don't run against the Republican
Oh,
incumbent.
okay. I
right?
thought you were talking about the
I
other way. I
get
was like, well,
that.
that's how elections work, Nick.
But they're trying to make it like a house precedent that regardless of party, you just don't run. That's dumb.
Yep.
That's dumb.
If you're a terrible
right?
candidate, you deserve to
If
be
you're a
knocked
terrible
out.
candidate, you deserve to be knocked out, right? If you're caught sleeping like the Republicans were in 2018, you deserve to get those. You deserve to lose those seats because you shouldn't be caught sleeping if you represent the people. You should make sure that you always have a good case to present to your constituents. They weren't able to do that in the 65th in 2018, so we get Michelle Beckley in the seat. She's our incumbent this year. We're going to talk a little bit about her, but before we get into that. So James and I both live either in the 65th district or really, really close to the 65th district. And make no mistake, friends, even if you just live close to a district, especially if you live in a big city area, right? So Houston, Austin, or DFW for Texas. In Illinois, you got places like Chicago and Baltimore and in Maryland and Detroit, right? So if you live in these really big metropolitan areas, these districts are usually packed pretty close together. And if you live in close proximity to one of these districts, you also have a sort of stake in how that district votes because you're probably traveling through there. You might work in this district.
Well,
so
they'll magically redraw the lines.
yeah,
and so
so
now you're dealing with that. District.
Exactly right. Redistricting is a big thing, especially in states, right? Redistricting happens all the time. So you do have an investment in who is set, even in the districts that are in close proximity to you, not just the one that you happen to live in. So James and I live in either in the 65th district or very close to the 65th district. By the way, if you live in North Texas, 65th district is you're talking about Louisville. Going a little bit further west, you're getting into Flower Mound. Up north, you're coming into sort of the Little Elm area, and then you've got right there in the bottom corner, in the southeastern corner, you've got portions of Dallas and Carrollton.
Yeah.
So some very small portions are going to be in that district. And Michelle Beckley is currently your representative in the Texas State House of Representatives. Now, it is important to note that is not your representative in the United States Congress, right? That's your state representative. So that's who represents you at the courthouse in Austin, or at the
Capitol in
the
Austin.
Capitol in Austin, right?
Did
Not
you
the
know that our
courthouse.
Capitol building is actually taller than the Capitol building in DC?
In DC, it is.
Our
And did you-
statue is just a little taller,
Yeah.
just to make sure we're a country before we were a state.
Yeah. Do you know what the governor's house in Texas is called?
No,
Right. It's called the Pink House.
the Pink House. Why the Pink House?
It was because it's made of that. So it's really common here in the state of Texas. You get this really pink granite, like the courthouse in Fort Worth is made of the pink granite. The old ballpark in Arlington, rest in peace. Right. Actually, it's still up. It's just
still there.
It's still there. It's going to be turned into a parking lot soon, and that's going to make me cry. It's built out of that pink granite. So the governor's house in Austin is made out of that same stuff. So it's called the Pink House instead of the White House. Fun fact for you, if you don't live in Texas, right? But yeah, it's just a little bit
breast
taller.
cancer thing about the Pink House. That'd be a great PR thing.
Yeah, Pink House breast cancer
Awareness.
campaign. That'd be interesting. No, it's interesting that you said that it's just a little bit taller than the congressional building in the United States because we were a country first. I love the fact that we're still called, even though we're a state, we're still called the Republic of Texas.
Dang right.
It's awesome. It's just like, and I mean, whether you're one of these state pride people, which there are a lot of here in the state of
We were very
Texas,
arrogant
right?
Texans.
Very, very arrogant.
I mean,
Are a
when
lot
your
of these-
flag can be legally the same height as the American flag, we're kind of the big deal.
That is not true. There's a lot of states that have that law.
Yeah,
in
but
place.
Texas.
The point, but it is Texas, right? There's a lot of state pride in Texas. Even if you're not one of these people, it's just really cool that we're still called the Republic of Texas.
Yeah.
And so if people ask what state you're from, you can literally tell them I'm from the Republic, which is super interesting.
And then they'll not talk to you ever again.
Anyway, let's talk about Michelle Beckley. Let's talk about who is currently representing you and up for re-election right now. If you live in House District 65, Michelle Beckley is your representative. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the issues that they consider a priority. We're going to talk a little bit about each of their careers, who endorses them, and in Michelle Beckley's case, we'll talk about some of the legislation that she's passed. So priority issues, right? So what is Michelle Beckley most concerned about? Really, her big ones are healthcare, education, and the environment, right? Healthcare, education, the environment. Healthcare is the biggest one. You've got a lot of changes that are happening because of Rona. And by the way, when we say Rona, we're talking about Corona. We're talking about COVID-19.
COVID-19.
I know that so it's kind of a thing that we just call it the Rona, but that's what we mean. So with COVID-19, there's a lot of issues going on right now in the healthcare industry. So Michelle Beckley is really pressing hard into that as an issue. She's always been for having affordable care, affordable health insurance for Texans. That is something that she pushes really hard. In fact, she's passed a lot of legislation that have to do, or she's filed a lot of legislation. Not all of it's been passed. She's filed a lot of legislation that has to do,
showing she cares.
With Medicare, Medicaid, things of that nature. So that's a big point for her. Education. She is for maximizing our education budget. She wants to make sure as much money as possible is getting into our schools and our funding, especially in specific areas, in sort of underrepresented areas. She wants education improvement there. And the environment. She's passed a lot of different legislation with regard to zoning, with regards to highways and utilities, things that are going to help preserve the environment of the state of Texas. So those are her priority issues. Of course, every candidate will typically refer to specific issues, and they have their opinion on issues. I want to talk about not necessarily where they stand, but what issues are most important to them, because I think that says more about the individual. Because, of course, all you have to know is that Michelle Beckley has a D next to her name to know where she stands on gun control, right? Yeah. But the fact is that Michelle Beckley doesn't really talk a lot about gun control, right?
She's a Texan.
If you look at her campaign, there's not a whole lot there about gun control. She is for common sense gun reform, but it's just not a priority issue for her. So that's what we're looking at: healthcare, education, environment, and as it stands, weed. She is a big proponent of legalization of marijuana in the state of Texas. That's not really a priority for her, but it is interesting because I really haven't found a House congressperson who has had as strong of an opinion on the issue of marijuana as Beckley does.
Maybe she'll get it passed this time.
She might. Yeah, that's entirely true. She has introduced legislation. She has filed legislation for the recreational. And by the way, this is not decriminalization. She is for the complete legalization of recreational and medical marijuana in the state of Texas. Now, James, real quick, because you are in fact Justice James, can you tell everyone what the difference is between legalization and decriminalization? Do you know the difference? I don't know the difference.
I mean, it sounds like it's honestly the same, but I would say the legalization is you're just simply saying you can buy it in certain things, and decriminalization is possibly meaning you're going to take away the certain verdicts of other individuals who got maybe penalized for the criminal acts of selling or using or being caught with marijuana. To be honest with you, I think they kind of use them interchangeably. Yeah. She wants the weed to flow.
She wants the weed to flow. Absolutely.
Nothing wrong with that.
All right. Who endorses Michelle Beckley? All right. So there are many endorsers of Michelle Beckley, right? Now, again, this is common when you have someone who is an incumbent seat.
Oh, yeah.
Right. When they're already in Congress, you get a lot more endorsements because that's
You're already
where
established. You're
yeah,
there.
because that's where the lobbyists go. The lobbyists are going to Austin. They're looking for these candidates. So a challenger is not necessarily going to have as many endorsements. So who endorses Michelle Beckley? The American Federation of Labor endorses Michelle Beckley. Equality Texas, which is an LGBT lobby, they endorse Michelle Beckley. Annie's List. I didn't even know Annie's List. So Annie's List is like it's like not really a contract, but
I
it's
think
like
of pretzels when I hear Annie's.
No, that's Aunt Anne's. That's different. Annie's List
pretzels.
is essentially it's like the Good Contractors List. You know what that is?
No.
Right. So it's essentially for people
Better Business Bureau for contractors.
people that provide services. Right. It's Annie's List gives recommendations for reputable services. Essentially, that's what it is. I had no idea that Annie's List even endorsed political candidates, but they are endorsing Michelle Beckley. Planned Parenthood of Texas is endorsing Michelle Beckley. The Texas Ag Fund, and this is a really interesting one, Beef Pack. Beef Pack is endorsing Michelle
Well, I like
Beckley.
steak, so I think I may have just chose my candidate.
Because you don't really think, when you think Democratic candidate, you don't think, oh yeah, Big Beef is supporting that candidate. I think this really has to do a lot with
I think for Texas, that is the most important one to have endorsement.
with Michelle Beckley. I think
just won.
I think it's because of her environmental regulation. I think that Big Beef is Beef Pack, and again, I haven't done all that much investigation into Beef Pack. as an organization or as a lobbying organization, but I would assume that the reason why they're endorsing her is because of her environmental stance. Big Beef wants to have good environment so that we can raise healthy cattle and that we can continue to produce revenue for the beef and meat industry. So let's talk about her career. It's not a whole lot because she is currently still a freshman representative. She's just finishing out her first term after winning in 2018. She is a small business owner, right? She was a small business owner before she became the freshman representative of the 56th district. Yeah. According to the Texas Academy of Physician Assistants. Now remember, one of Michelle Beckley's biggest endorsements is healthcare, or one of her biggest issues is healthcare. So according to the Texas Academy of Physician Assistants, she was ruled Legislature of the Year. Ooh. Does that mean anything to you?
I hope she got a trophy.
She did. There's actually a picture. If you go onto her website, there is a picture of her in front of their logo holding. It was one of those glass trophies. It wasn't
fancy.
Yeah, it wasn't one of the. It was one of the metal trophies.
Hopefully, not all the funding to make the trophy as well.
So I've always seen trophies. Whenever I see trophies in movies, it's always a cup, right? Like I think Premier League. It's literally a big cup with handles on it. I've never received a trophy like that ever. All of my trophies have been either the little glass trophies or they've been like. The ones that you would get in Little League with the sort of plastic stand and a little baseball player on top. Yeah. All my trophies look like that. I've never received. I've always wanted.
I've just gotten
like
participation ribbons
for sure. Yeah, I believe that 100%. Right. So, not a ton to talk about as far as her political career outside.
Well, yeah, only one term.
Yeah, outside of the legislation that she has filed, or
which, if you don't know in Texas, means she's probably been a legislative, the actual our Congress once
for one session. Yeah,
because we only meet every 2 years. If you didn't know, now you know.
Which, by the way, what do you think about that? Do you think that we should change that in Texas?
No, I think it's a great thing. I think it allows for less knee-jerk reactions. Because if the issue is that important, Texas has it in our large constitution to allow it to have a special session, which we've done from time to time on various things. But if it's just a few people ranting and raving about certain things, typically it's going to have to wait until the next 2-year runaround comes about. And again, there's probably several issues that you feel really passionate about and that you feel wronged about, but the overall rule is probably the better sense of the rule, because you see certain states just making laws to make laws to appease the small crowd of the day, and Texas doesn't do that.
Yeah. So a lot of people have different opinions about government gridlock. And when you hear government gridlock, that almost always has a negative connotation.
Yeah.
I would say you do need to understand this, especially at local levels. If you have gridlock, that's not necessarily always a bad thing.
No one's enforcing their right against you. They're saying you don't have the votes, bro.
You don't necessarily want governments, especially if your preferred party is not currently in power. Yeah. Then government gridlock is a great thing, right? This is why we have things like the filibuster, right? In order to impose government gridlock ability onto minorities. So gridlock is not always bad, because you don't always necessarily want, like James said, these knee-jerk policies going into play. And so the 2-year congressional sessions in Texas, I'm still not entirely sure where I stand on that. I think it's probably a fairly good thing, because it gives you time to think about the actual laws that you want to pass. These laws do influence people's lives.
Right. It takes detail, and most of these people are lawyers, and so they're writing this up and trying to put it in the most detailed way to not allow this to come to litigation again. And so I think it is the better realm, because it does force the slow, methodical way to do it. But, for instance, when it comes to this current candidate for marijuana, that has taken forever to even get a session. I think it had its farthest it's reached, I think, is their whatever the little focus group talks about it this last term, and that possibly means that maybe it'll come up to an actual vote next time. Who knows?
Yeah. So on a personal note with Michelle Beckley, Dallas Morning News said that she was the most progressive representative in the Texas House of Representatives, which is interesting about House District 65. Fun fact, it is the smallest geographical district in the state, right? So it's a very small group of people, but there's a lot in there, right? There's a lot of people in there, and she represents those people, and they elected her as the most progressive member of the Texas House of Representatives.
Would she vote on two things?
No, she's
I'm kidding.
she's filed. Yeah,
Let's say she's filed a lot of things.
several pieces of legislation. She's actually co-authored for a freshman representative. This girl's a workhorse.
She came in punching, man.
She's done a lot of stuff. And the thing is that on her campaign, I don't know about you, but I drive around District 60. I live there, right? So I drive around District 65 all the time. I see tons. I see more Michelle Beckley signs really than I do any other state or national or local representative.
She's made her mark.
She is a workhorse, man. She campaigns hard. She pushes hard for what she believes in the Congress, right? So she's got an iron will. Some of the legislation that she's filed, right? She's filed House Bill 1179.
Oh yeah, I know that
which expands Medicare recipients, right? So it actually increases the minimum income requirements in order to receive Medicaid, right, from the state of Texas. She's filed House Bill 1645, which is push against pre-existing conditions. So it's basically mandating that insurance companies in Texas cannot discriminate based on pre-existing conditions. Bills that she's co-authored, House Bill 455, which is, again, she likes education. This is an interesting bill. I actually read through the text of this. This is actually requiring recess for I don't know if it's K through 12, but at least for
I hope it requires recess
K
at
through 9.
jobs. I like to have recess while I'm working.
It requires an unstructured recess time for all private and public school institutions in the state of Texas. I just thought that was an interesting one. I'm not entirely sure how impactful that's going to be, but it's an interesting piece of
I
legislation.
don't know. I think it makes sense for kids. I mean, you can't coop them up all day and expect them to act right. It's like, well, they're kids. Their attention span's gone.
Yeah, I think that one's relatively uncontroversial. I think that's probably going to pass.
If you want a controversy about it, I can find a reason to get controversy.
That's probably going to pass, right? House is another co-author, House Bill 1182, which was requiring high school, and I really like this bill. This might be my favorite thing about Michelle Beckley. She passed this bill which requires K through 12, or I don't know if it's K through 12, but it's at the very least high school and junior high to have a mandatory financial literacy course.
No,
mandatory financial literacy course. Because when
know what you're signing before you sign that dotted line.
Yeah, when I went through high school, personal finance was an elective, right? It was you could choose whether you want to take it or not. I will tell you this, man. Once I've gotten into the real world after high school and college, I wish that's the one thing. Someone needed to show me how to pay my taxes, and somebody needed to show me how to balance a budget, because that's really all that I do in my adult life. So that's a big one. I think that's going to pass. It's currently.
I just swipe the card until it tells me I can't anymore.
that one is currently in
method.
Yeah, that one is currently in committee. I have a feeling it's going to pass, though. I have a feeling that's going to pass big time. And then she passed House Bill 188, which is expanding various discrimination laws in the state of Texas to include sexual preference and gender identity. So this is part of her LGBTQ lobby, right? So these are some.
Well, that one may actually be done for her. I mean, the recent Supreme Court decision probably helped.
Very true.
Put that in, so she may not have to actually fight for that one anymore.
Very true. But she did co-author that bill, and
she did it first.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, it's just important to know this is the candidate. That you want. Then that's where she is. All right. So who is her challenger right now? Who is her challenger? Her challenger is a lady named Kronda Timish. Kronda Timish. Right now, her last name is her first name is not Rhonda. It is Kronda. Right. Like with a K, Kronda, right? Kronda Timish.
Sweet name.
Her last name, I had so much trouble when I actually first found her. I had something like, what? How do you spell? Her last name is spelled Thimech. So I'm like, Timish. Kronda Timish, which she's not Russian. She's actually of Latin descent, I believe, right? She's a Latina woman. And Kronda Timish, for those of you that only care about the letter next to her name, it is an R. Her priority issues, education is number one for Kronda, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about her career and where she's been, but education has been very important to her throughout pretty much the entirety of her political career. Number two is economy/tax reform. She is a big proponent of small business. She is a big proponent of making sure that small businesses can flourish in the state of Texas, and particularly in her district. That's important to her. Property tax is a big one, right? So property tax cuts, this kind of falls into tax reform/economy. Property tax cuts.
Like getting rid of it?
Not getting rid of it, but
Well,
I mean, I think her plan talks
there's a
about
lot of people who want to get rid of the property tax.
getting rid of some of the regulations that force property tax cuts, and also sort of regulating appraisals so that appraisals can't go up. Because that's the thing, is even if your property taxes don't go up, it's an interesting thing about real estate. Even if your property taxes don't go up, if the appraised value of your home goes up, your taxes are going to go up, right? Because the property tax is a percentage of the home's appraised value.
So Nick,
right?
as a realtor here, would it behoove the person just to make their house look like dog trash, just so their property taxes don't go up?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, do not do
There's
that.
no way around the system there?
This is one of those areas where I will be very biased, right? Again, I am a realtor, so I love property law. I love owning a home. I'm a big advocate for owning a home and owning property. Equity is a big deal, right? Even equity in the home that you live in is a big deal, right? So if your property values are going up, that is a good thing. Oh, but I'm going to pay more in taxes. Yes, but you actually are increasing your net worth as an individual. Right. So yes, you'll have to pay more in taxes, and which is why I'm in favor of keeping the property tax rates down. Right. So that if the appraisal goes up, you're not increasing taxes much more. Now, there is a case to be made as to whether or not appraisals and property taxes should be connected. Whole other discussion. I might actually be in favor of something like that. But the fact is, if you can keep the tax rates down, then you will allow your property value to go up. The problem is that property is a non-liquid asset, right? So if you own your home, that doesn't reflect in cash in your bank account.
Right.
You have to sell the home in order to have those funds realized.
You'd be
So a
cash
lot of people
poor but property rich.
Exactly. So a lot of people don't like the property. So, my appraisal went up, and they don't necessarily see the benefits of that immediately, but what they do see is the cost of that immediately, because the taxes go up right away, but your actual property value isn't going to. You're not going to realize that until later on. So I definitely am not.
Just like anything else, you don't notice the bill until the bill goes up. You're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Here.
If the appraised value of your home goes up, be very clear, that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. And if you can't handle the taxes because the appraised value of your property went up, then you probably bought more house than you can afford. And so that's a whole nother discussion as to what you qualify for versus what you actually afford. And so you should be in a place where you can afford for the appraised value of your home to go up. Okay. Let's talk about who endorses Kronda Timish, right? First things first, when we just got done talking about property and taxes. By the way, also included in her business/economy/tax reform is spending, right? She wants to
Make it rain?
decrease.
She wants to make it rain?
No, she wants to decrease the amount of spending that's happening in Austin, right? So not be spending as much money, particularly on things like pork spending bills and things of that nature.
I mean, as a person who likes bacon, I don't know if I can vote for this woman.
Bacon. I can't say the word. I can't say that word without saying it like it. Bacon. Bacon. Anyway, so endorsements. We just got done talking about top property taxes. Kronda Timish is endorsed by the Texas Association of Realtors, right? Texas Association of Realtors, of course, is a subsidiary of the National Association of Realtors. By the way, a realtor and a real estate agent are not the same thing. A realtor, you have to be a member of that association in order to be classified as a realtor. It's different, but
You gotta pay the troll toll.
but it's pretty much the same thing, right? If you have a real estate agent that is not a member of the National Association or the Texas Association of Realtors, I'm not going to say anything, but there's a governing body for a reason, right? Who else endorses Kronda Timish? A plethora of law enforcement officers.
$5 word there.
A bunch of law enforcement officers, a bunch of law enforcement precincts.
Like individually or just precincts?
Precincts.
Okay.
Yeah. The Denton County Sheriff's Office endorses Kronda. All of these, there's all sorts of different police precincts in here. This is a big part of Kronda Timish's campaign. She rejects the defund the police narrative, and she is for increase of law enforcement in order to keep communities safe. Also, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, right? So again, big issue for Kronda is business/economy/tax reform that earned her an endorsement from the National Federation of Independent Businesses. By the way, she is the only current person running for for Texas House that is endorsed by the National Federation of Independent Businesses, or the NFIB, which I just learned was a thing, right?
I've been following them regularly.
Exactly, exactly right. I do not follow them on Instagram. I don't follow anybody on Instagram because I don't have one. Let's talk about her career. So obviously, you don't have a huge political career like Michelle Beckley does because she has never actually served in any legislative body, at least in an official legislature like a House or a Senate. But she is also a small business owner. It's worth noting she has owned a small business with her husband for something like 15 to 20 years. She's been a Republican precinct chair. For 2 years, she served as the president of Republican Women for Denton, Collin, and Dallas County.
Been trying to get in that club for years. They won't let me in.
Yeah, well, I think the Y chromosome might be an issue there. But she has served as president there. And next thing is she is a member, she has been for many years a member of the Louisville Independent Schools District Board of Trustees. So she is a trustee for LISD. She has actually been improved to the rank of master trustee, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but apparently for LISD it is.
I wonder if you get a new badge.
She's served on that board for a very long time. She's been very invested in education. That's why education, I think, is number one on her priority of issues. So, let's talk for a little bit about our candidates here. James, what are our initial thoughts on Representative Beckley? What do we think about her? What do we like? What do we not like? And again, this is you can do your opinion as much as possible.
Well, I mean, the healthcare thing is probably a good thing for Texans. I mean, because let's be honest, healthcare can always be refined and redone. To me, it's like it's really tough because typically when I hear healthcare, they usually give me a bumper sticker answer. They don't really go into it. But to her benefit, she has written a lot of things, so that actually is a good thing. Just depends on how much my taxes go to it. The weed thing, I mean, I joked about it, but I mean, it doesn't really bother me one way or the other. I mean, from being a person in Texas, and being in public high school, I've not had a struggle to see it around me. Let's be real. I mean, we've all gone to school. We know who does it, so there you go. But I would say since she's actually been such a go-getter, I mean, she actually looks like a pretty good candidate because she came in, like I said earlier, she came in punching. She's written a bunch of different bills. She's tried to get something passed. She's not taking it as a simple spot. It's not a bad thing. I mean, she at least is trying. Whether or not it's the D or the R you agree with, she's at least trying to show she cares.
Yeah, she's pushing hard, for sure. So interesting thing that you mentioned education. That is actually the one priority issue where our two candidates intersect. Both of them have education as a priority issue. The difference, I think, is that Michelle Beckley's solution is simply increasing the funding. And the Rhonda Timish doesn't necessarily want to increase the funding, but she wants to reallocate the funding. Right, she wants to reallocate the funding into things that give incentive for good teachers, like teachers' pay raise and teachers' salaries, and she also wants to make sure that school boards and school spending is done efficiently and
what does that
effectively.
mean, though? Efficiently.
Well, it
sounds like you're just moving money around, so you're not really actually trying to help. If I was the contrarian looking into it, that's what I just heard.
So one of the biggest differences between them is that Michelle Beckley on her platform specifically says that she's against vouchers. She's against voucher programs. Rhonda Timish doesn't say anything one way or the other about vouchers. Mm-hmm. So I think she wants to reorganize. What I would assume, and this is again,
from what I would know about vouchers, don't they just mostly allow school choice?
Yeah, so it's a school choice feature, right?
I mean,
so a voucher would basically mean the money follows the student, meaning so you can choose what school you want to go to, and you are given a certain set of funding from the government as per the number of students that you have. So it employs sort of a quasi-market onto the school system. Now, whether Rhonda Timish is specifically for that or not, I have no idea, because honestly, in all the literature I've read and all the things that I've seen about her, she hasn't even mentioned it. But she has mentioned the fact that we have to be more efficient with the money that we have going into the school system. So that might lend itself towards being in support of vouchers. I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
But
you said she hasn't spoken directly on it, so nothing we can't comment on that part of her election.
So essentially we have one candidate that says there's not enough money going into the system at all. And we have another candidate that says, listen, the money that is going into the system right now is not being spent correctly. That's essentially the difference between the two. That being said, I love Michelle Beckley, her stance on education, right? I love the fact that she stands for education. Specifically, that legislation about financial literacy courses, I think,
Oh,
is
yeah.
I think it's a knockout.
That'd been great to have before I signed those student loans.
That is a no-brainer piece of legislation. If it does not pass through the Texas House of Representatives, I will be shocked and I'll be absolutely appalled. Because the fact is...
Well, she's a D next to her name, so like you said, the R's are there, so it's going to be tough.
The R's are there, so they're going to be tough. But I think that this is easily a cross-platform piece of legislation.
We'll
right?
see.
This is financial literacy, right? You're going to talk about the Republicans going to be against financial literacy programs?
We've seen politicians do crazier things.
I think this thing passes. I think that piece of legislation passes, and I think that Texas will be way better for it. Again,
I think so too.
To me, it's a no-brainer. To me, that's a no-brainer. I really like that about her. But there's some other features. Again, she's a workhorse. Small business owners are really good, although business is not necessarily one of her priority issues. But I'm definitely anybody that says that they want to improve education, I'm 100% for that. And I know that's like I almost sound like a politician when I say that, right? I'm for education. Well, yeah, I know, but really,
Shocker.
people that put that as a priority, that really speaks to me.
And actually talk about it. Don't just put it as a bullet point and move on. It's like, no,
sure.
say a little bit. And she said a little bit in hers. And like you said, she's put in, or at least tried to put in certain laws and written them herself or sponsored others that seem like should be cross-partisan aisles. We'll see if it happens, though.
For sure. And moving on, we will see. What do we not like about Michelle Beckley?
She's a Democrat. No, I'm just kidding. I don't care.
I don't care. Well, I am going to force you to answer the question, right?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's nice and all to have a lot, like you said, the more money, to me, I guess I got to see what that means, because when it comes to more spending, typically I'm not a huge fan. Then again, I sound like I'm heartless, because what if we need more spending? I get it. But when you just say that a blanket statement, I'm typically not a fan of on your R or D next to your name, just because more spending typically means more taxes.
Yeah. Taxes, we know likey. Texans don't
Taxation stuff? What?
Texans don't like taxes. Texans do not like taxes, right?
But both have T's. One of them we still disagree.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I'm not, one of the things, and then we'll get to Cronda here in a second. One of the things that I like about Cronda is her stance on spending. Michelle Beckley, for what it's worth, has not said, I want to increase spending, but of course, what politicians are going to be like, I want to spend more of your money?
Yeah, I'm not going to be honest with you on that part.
Yeah, nobody's going to say I'm in favor of spending, especially not in the state of Texas. But Michelle Beckley hasn't said anything one way or the other. Again, all the literature that I've looked up on her,
It's called being a good politician.
Yeah, she hasn't said one thing or another. So and again, a lot of these policies, whilst many of them are good or at least worth discussion, a lot of them are very expensive, and we tend and again, I'm going to say in this country, even though this is more about local stuff.
Well, Texas is a country.
We tend to focus on things other than spending. But when you especially when you start getting into the local level, spending becomes a big deal, right? Because that influences how your business operates. That influences how much money you're paying in property taxes.
That makes that 99-cent bag of chips a little more expensive.
Or income tax, or how much you're paying for those sales taxes, right? So this is actually, spending on the national level, obviously people are like, oh, well, spending budget, whatever. And it's difficult to kind of put yourself in perspective, and it's put that into perspective and understand. But on the local level, it really does matter, right? Because again, that bag of chips just got way more expensive, right? Sales taxes, where your money's going, how it's being spent on your communities, that is way more important when you're talking about your state and your local representatives. So again, Michelle Beckley on spending, I'm going to go ahead and give her a D, right? Which is consequently the name, the letter that she has next to her name.
Next to her name,
There's a big D next to her name. I'll give her a D on that. But I'll rate her a lot higher on things like education. Again,
actually give it a crap, I'd give her an A.
Yeah, for her work ethic, man, she gets an A++. That's a big deal, right? As far as the weed, once again, really don't care.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
we're gonna get hate on for that.
I'm gonna leave that aside. I'm gonna leave that. I'm gonna give her a D for don't care about that at all, right? But this is an interesting concept. So spending is where we're not super happy with Representative Beckley. Let's talk about Mrs. Timish, right? Mrs. Cronda Timish. What do we like about Kronda.
I like her name. That's really interesting.
Kronda Timish. Sounds like a barbarian.
Yeah. No.
My name is Kronda.
Well, I do like that she's, on the board of what you said, the board of trustees, was it, for Louisville or something like that? Master trustee.
Yeah, the LASD board. Mm-hmm.
I think that someone like that would know how to redo the education system, especially in Texas at local level, because nationally, as we've talked about, there's too much mud in the works. But if you can handle it from Texas wise, we can possibly increase our learning and our betterment for our state, and the rest can start following our model. So I do like that she has that background and she's actually trying to do that for that reason, because like you said, that was pretty much her first issue was education. So yeah, I think to me that's a good thing.
All right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Education. Anyone that puts emphasis on education, I'm going to be for that. The fact that she doesn't have any education endorsers, but that is a priority for her. She has served on the Louisville ISD Board of Trustees. That's a big deal. Things that I don't like are things that I like about her. Education, emphasis on education. I'll always be in favor of that. And also the reverse of what we talked about with Michelle Beckley, who didn't have a lot of information about spending. Kronda has not been unclear about this. She believes that we're overspending in Austin. I tend to agree with her to an extent, and I think anyone that takes a stance against spending, that's a good thing. Because here's the thing: politicians
can't give them a blank check, man.
Politicians love to rail about taxes, right? I'm going to lower your taxes. Well, lowering my taxes doesn't do anything if you're still spending the money, which is now money you don't have because you're not taxing me for it.
Hey,
right?
Man, no one's charging that credit card.
So you're still taxing me. You're just taxing me in the form of a deficit. So spending is a big deal. The fact that she backs up her tax reforms with a decrease in spending, I think that's a big deal too. So what do we not like about Kronda?
She has the R next to her name, so again, don't like that.
You're just a mystery, aren't you?
Oh, well, I think that it's nice that she has a plethora of law enforcement individuals, but without any knowledge of the other candidate actually saying to defund, that to me is just kind of taking like the big rail ticket of the easy one. Again, going to the national. Well, the national has said defund, not exactly, but some have said it. The local level, though, have they actually started out to be that? So to me, taking a huge risk on that, then again, I don't blame her. I get it. The base likes it. It's fine. Mm-hmm. I really don't have much I don't like about her except for that she isn't experienced. But then again, that's kind of the whole benefit of the American system is you don't have to work for it to be assistant manager to be manager. You can be the no name that gets there. So there it is.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. Inexperience is a big problem for Kronda. She has a lot of experience on some of these local boards, Republican precinct chairs, things like that. But if you actually do your research on her, she hasn't actually spent a lot of time in any sort of real legislative body, which by comparison, in the 24th district, you've got, Beth Van Doon, who's currently running for 24th district, who's currently the mayor of Irving, right? So it's not to say that, well, you got to start somewhere. No, a lot of these people have held political office. Kronda has had no such experience, right? She's very green. So that's a big deal. But I do want to point out certain things about her education. One is that she doesn't seem to have a plan. Right, she hasn't put out any sort of.
Man. Don't worry about it.
She hasn't put out any sort of plan when it comes to education. Now, I love that she emphasizes education. I do. Right, that's an important thing to understand. But it's also important to note that if you just say we're going to reallocate funds, okay, how? How are we going to reallocate funds for these sorts of things?
Just trust her, man.
What are
Politicians
we trying
have never
to do,
lied
right?
to me.
Increasing teachers' salaries. Okay, I get it, but what new schools are going to be built? What new property or what new pieces of property? What new resources are you going to bring to the table? And again, she doesn't lay out her plans effectively, especially on education. So that is I give her a D for presentation of a plan. As far as her emphasis on education, I'm all for it. But you got to tell me what you're doing, right? And then again,
Yeah, that's for me. It's the same thing. It's like I if you have a D or R, that's fine, but you got to at least explain your plan. Don't just give me a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
And you're right. She's kind of giving us a bumper sticker. Maybe she's had other rallies that we haven't paid attention to because it's a local level that we just haven't seen, or no rallies because no one's having rallies.
I give her an A on on taxes / spending reform because those two things have to go in concert, guys. You got to remember that. If you're going to cut taxes, you got to cut spending, right? The money's got to come from somewhere. All right, so as someone who lives near House District 65 or in House District 65, what do you think should be most important to the voters as far as their local lives? What do you think? What do you think they should consider?
I think they should mostly consider what they're going to do with education because the Texas education system has been doing fine. But as someone who's very close with teachers, I know quite a few. There's a lot of mystery every year of what's going to happen. What's this going to do? What's that going to do? Just a little more transparency on that one. And if Texas Congress or the Senate can actually give us some actual transparency, that'd be fantastic. So for me, the focus on the education should be more spelled out, and then they should give updates on what's going on with the update or with that plan, if it's actually passing, if it hasn't passed committee, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So for District 65 specifically, as someone who lives there and I know the area very well, one thing that neither of the candidates have really said a lot about, in, again, a lot of the literature and a lot of the videos I've seen, you don't see a lot about this, but friends, we got to know what these people are going to do about lockdowns. We've got to know what they're going to do about COVID-19. What is their policy on how we operate in COVID-19? What is their policy on helping us maintain public health safety? What is their policy on helping us maintain economic solvency during this time, right? In districts like this, right, in these non-agricultural districts, it's important to know that because a lot of you guys own businesses or you work at small businesses in the area. You have got to know what your candidate says about how that business needs to be run. You have got to know what they're going to do to keep people safe while operating those businesses. That's an important thing to understand, especially at the local level, right? The fact is that the national government can't really do a whole lot about public safety on a broad level. We talk about national mask mandates. We talk about the fact is a national mask mandate may well not even be enforceable if it's passed.
I don't think it's constitutional, right? Yeah.
I mean, constitutional or not, it may not be enforceable because a lot of state representatives and local representatives are going to be like, no, we're not going to enforce that, right? And so you have to know.
That would be the thing. You pass the mandate, the governor says, yeah, we're not doing that.
Well, you got to know what is your local politician's policy on that. Are they going to enforce a mask mandate if there is no national mask mandate? Are they going to not enforce a national mask mandate that is passed? And how do you feel about that? The fact is that neither of these candidates have spoken in great detail about how they feel about how to deal with COVID and how to deal with businesses during COVID. You're going to have to press them on that. You're going to have to dig for that information because I think that's going to be a big time issue for the voters.
Right, because it's not, I mean, they may be looking at it, both of them may be looking at it from, well, this isn't going to be forever, but from what we know right now, this is definitely in our foreseeable future.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely going to be.
Until it goes away, it is probably something that does need to be talked about. You're completely right.
All right. Well, you got any final thoughts on our? We've had, gosh, how long? We've been doing this for over 2 hours, man.
Yeah.
You got any final thoughts before we depart? Hayden's over there looking at me, going, "Dude, wrap this up." Right. My producer's like, "I have other things to do." So, you got any final thoughts before you leave?
No, I'm just happy that I got the promotion to be a justice on this podcast. I will make my decisions forthwith.
So let it be written.
You know. I don't have anything besides that. Besides, I had a good time today.
All right, friends. Well, I do have some final thoughts, and what is, make sure that you are paying attention. Make sure that you are aware. It is important to vote, but it is equally important to be informed. Make sure you take that out there into the world, and I will see you all on another day and another time.